So that's just a warm-up. Thank you for your applause. It's hard work. So my name is Eddie Robinson. I'm working with the Center for Indigenous Learning and Support here at Sheridan College. I was hired recently as the Indigenous Wellness and Knowledge Keeper. So yeah, they hired me as a knowledge keeper because I made a lot of mistakes in my life. So, you know, I'm smarter for it. And I have the world-acclaimed singer, Mr. Gary Parker. Let's give Gary a round of applause. He's from the Seneca Nation, right? I used to be a huge fan of Gary growing up around the Powell Arena and Circle. He had a group back in the day called Young Nation, and it was such an amazing display of music compositions within the Seneca language, right? And I mean, it's such, you know, an amazing thing to be on the forefront today in terms of where our music has gone in terms of traditional formulas. And Izkwe, a good friend of mine, is here too as well. Izkwe, can you stand up? There she is. She just got nominated for a Juno. Let's give her a round of applause. So Izkwe is an Indigenous performer. She's Métis. She's from Manitoba. She's an amazing friend of mine, and she's just an amazing, amazing musician and artist. And she's taken music in a different way in terms of, you know, the strength of our Indigenous women, or Anishinaabe. And so I'm really happy to have her here with me as my guest, because the song that we both collaborated, all three of us have collaborated on, is being released today. I didn't even ask you the name of the song. What's the name of the song? The Unforgotten. Can they Google it right now? Tomorrow, okay. Oh, sorry, it was being announced today. It's coming out tomorrow, sorry. So we had the opportunity to actually, let's give her a round of applause. She's a musical genius. I can see you hiding between the crowds of people over there, and she's blushing. If you get a chance, please go and connect with her, go talk to her, go take a selfie with her, right? Ask her for her autograph. No, but honestly, she's just been an amazing, amazing contribution to Indigenous music in Canada. So without further ado, we're going to do the first thing in warming people up, but I need some help from the audience here. So who here knows how to do a round dance? Put your hand up. No, everybody's afraid. All right, can you come up? Can you bring your partner up? Or your friend? Sorry, I don't want to assume you guys are that serious yet. Oh, fiance. Let's give him a round of applause. All right. When's the big day?
August 11th.
August 11th. Cool. So you guys are going to stand here? You know how to round dance?
I do, but I have bum knees. I might not be able to do that.
Okay, so don't copy her completely. So we need more participants. So if you can join hands with them and go start making a circle that way. Come on up. We're not going to start until we have at least 20 people up here. You guys on? I'll just follow you. Other side, other side. Yep. You're going to lead it, right?
Okay.
You know how to lead it? Okay, cool. Chris, I see you there. Chris Noakes, come on up. Chris, are you still with Pan? Chris, put your hand up. This is Chris Noakes. She's with the Peel Aboriginal Network. Let's give her a round of applause. Some of our community leaders here joining us. So are you guys going to lead the round dance? Are you going to lead the round dance? No, go on the other side there. Yeah. I don't mean to kick you down the line, but yeah, there you go. Cool. We need some more people. All right. So just be conscious of the wires and all that kind of stuff, and try and do your best. If you want to go down the middle aisle, that's cool. All right. We need some more people. I'm not going to start till we have oh, there we go. Here we go. All right, Gary, take it away. Mr. Gary Parker. Give him a round of applause. Give these dancers here a round of applause. Awesome. Getting this party started right. So the next dance that we're going to do is similar to the round dance. Two-step, cheesy one. Is ladies' choice. You want to know what it is? So ladies' choice is two-step, right? So do we have any people in the crowd that know how to do a two-step? Isque, can you come up? I know you know. Don't hide. Don't sit down and relax. And so Isque needs a partner. Can somebody come up and help her? Or how about, you know what? Yeah, it's your choice. Go and choose somebody and then come back, and you need to follow everything she does. She's an amazing dancer as well. Just close your eyes and choose. And if you can, please Google her. Google has been my new elder lately. I ask Google everything. So we're going to do this two-step. So ladies, women, Nishnabekwe, our beautiful women, second to the Creator, our life givers, find a partner and line up in twos behind Isque. And your name, sir? Your name? Arnold Blackstar. I was supposed to introduce myself to Arnold when he got here. This is the best way possible to introduce myself to Arnold. Hi, Arnold. So can we get some more people, some more volunteers up here in pairs, or do I have to come out and tell you? Come on, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a really kind of social dance that we do at gatherings and celebrations, and this is a celebration. All right, come on, let's hear a round of applause. Get these people motivated and stoked. So we have an amazing speaker for you today, Roberta Jamieson, and this is just kind of getting the crowd ready for this amazing talk that's going to happen. But it's very customary right now for the Cree people, and I'm half Cree, to do round dance during this time, especially when there's snow on the ground. We're told that the Northern Lights are our ancestors, and when we have round dance like this, it's honoring and paying tribute to people, but it's also sometimes immemorial. So a lot of those kinds of things are understood when we practice this ceremony. We sing in this way. So, Isque, thank you so much. I owe you a bunch of tobacco. And you can lead this round dance. All right, two-step, sorry. And if you feel at any moment, you feel excited that you want to jump in, two people right here in the front. If you want to jump in at any point, please jump in the back, and then just follow everything that Isque and Arnold are doing, okay? give these guys a round of applause. Keep it going. Thank you, Arnold. Thank you, Izkwe. Chamigwech. So with that, we're going to give you some atmosphere music and get you ready for this amazing talk that's going to happen. So we're just going to share some songs for you, and at any moment you have any questions, just come up and ask us in the middle, and I'll be more than happy to answer anything that you need. Like I said, my name is Eddie Robinson. I am the Indigenous Wellness and Knowledge Keeper here, but before that I was speaking across the country, creating spaces and points of access for the Indigenous narrative. And it's just an honor to be here, to be invited to work here, and as well as invited to come and share this music. So with that, we're going to do some intertribals for you. You know Bear Creek one? I'll leave it off if you want.
Is that good?
That's good.
I'll follow you.
Hey,
sing one quick one. Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
Sure, ready.
Let's give Mr. Gary Parker a round of applause. He came all the way here from Fort Erie.
Thank you very much to both Eddie Robinson and Gary Parker, or Jerry Parker for the wonderful, Gary Parker for the wonderful performance. And to all of you guests this evening, welcome to Sheridan's Hazel McCallion campus. My name is Janet Morrison. I'm the Provost and Vice President Academic at Sheridan, and it's my privilege to serve as your MC this evening. To begin our program, I'd like to invite Eddie Robinson back to the podium. He is our Indigenous Healing and Wellness Knowledge Keeper in Sheridan Centre for Indigenous Learning and Support, and we've asked him to acknowledge the traditional lands on which Sheridan resides. Eddie?
Good morning. Just kidding. I keep telling people that I have 3-year-old twins, and it just kind of does things to your brain after a while. But I just wanted to take a moment to say in my language, introduce myself. Bojo, Wayne Bojo, Nodin and Dishnakas, Chichak Todem, Boating and Missinabi Korean, Dunjaba, and Dishnabe Neni and Omigwech, Gijimanitu, Chimigwech, Wabnang. Jaonang Ngabe nang Kwerenang, or Chimwich Mashromas Gizis, or Chimwich Nokomis Tabigizis, or Chigwich, or Manadu, Chimwich Manob Matsuin, or Manadu, Shawena Mishin, and Shawena Mishinag, or Manadu, Wishmamid, and Ishnabeneni, and Ishnabekwe. And so, in my language, when I acknowledge that name that I have been given by elders as my spirit name, Wind, I am acknowledging where I am in the universe. I also say my clan, and I'm from the Crane clan. It's important for me as a Anishinaabe to acknowledge that in terms of my role and responsibility to my community. I'm from the place of the Rapids, as well as the Missinabi Cree, who originate from Moose Factory. That is my location, but I'm also a proud Torontonian. Grew up in the Junction and the East End. But I want to acknowledge the land that we're on first, and I want to leave you with something to think about. As we gather here today, Sheridan would like to acknowledge that all of its campuses reside on the land for thousands of years before us, with the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Anishinaabe Nation, Huron-Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee. Am I saying that right, Roberta? I know, my Anishinaabe accent might ruin it there a bit. And the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. It is our collective responsibility to honor and respect those who have gone before us, those who are here, and those who have yet to come. We are grateful for the opportunity to be working on this land. And thank you. And so what I wanted to also acknowledge with a very short song, and I would ask you to stand if you could. Put your place in your mind, in your spirit, in a place of peace, especially what has happened recently with Colton in Saskatchewan, and our people, and the plight of oppression. I want you to put your heart in a place of prayer and peace and good energy as I sing this honor song for him. oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hi, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey, oh. So that song is a Menominee flag song, the Anishinaabe national anthem. I wanted to sing that song to honor these very important flags, especially the Iroquois Confederacy flag, honor that young man that is now in the spirit world in terms of the celebration of his life and his spirit. For us as Anishinaabe, we always do that in terms of how we can hold and support and honor our people. So miigwech, thank you for your time, and I'll see you soon. Miigwech.
Thank you, Eddie. A heartfelt welcome to this evening's Creative Campus Series event, presented by Sheridan Centre for Indigenous Learning and Support in partnership with Sheridan Student Union. The Creative Campus Series is supported by TD Bank Group. Their generosity is an endorsement by TD of the importance of purposeful creativity in education, work, and life. Our valued funding partner recognizes that creative thinking and problem solving are vital skills. This series supports the development of these skills with valuable, thought-provoking discussions. Tonight, I'd ask you to look up. We gather beneath the work of Inuk sculptor Cousine van Hoevelen's installation Nitsi, which means hooks in Inuktitut, and references traditional and historic Inuit production. Cousine spent the fall semester working with our faculty, students, and staff in the Faculty of Animation, Art, and Design's workshops at our Trafalgar campus to create the installation. The Sheridan community is proud to present it in partnership with the Art Gallery of Mississauga. Explicit in Sheridan's new academic plan is our commitment to past, present, and future Indigenous students. Those commitments rest on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action and on the Colleges and Institutes Canada Indigenous Education Protocol. Leading this work at Sheridan are members of the Centre for Indigenous Learning and Support team, all of whom are here tonight. Never has their leadership been more important or valued. More broadly, the pivotal role that post-secondary institutions in Canada must play in truth and reconciliation is abundantly clear. In the wake of the death of Colton Boushie and the recent acquittal of Gerald Stanley, Indigenous faculty members and allies wrote an open letter to Universities Canada and university presidents. That letter calls on post-secondary institutions to support Indigenous students, faculty, staff, and administrators during and beyond this difficult time. It underscores our moral, ethical, and legal obligation to, quote, ensure that Indigenous students, faculty, and staff are safe now and in the future. Further, it urges academic leaders to identify systemic barriers and take action to enhance institutional accountability towards Indigenous peoples and communities. It asks people in positions of power to promote and embrace decolonial and anti-oppressive education. As Sheridan's Chief Academic Officer and on behalf of the entire Sheridan community, I acknowledge and accept this accountability. In collaboration with our Indigenous Education Council, Sheridan will commit resources to design and implement a variety of curricular and co-curricular learning opportunities to embed Indigenous knowledge and values into the fabric of the Sheridan learning community. To underscore our commitment to Indigenous leadership, I want to acknowledge members of the Sheridan Indigenous Education Council who are here with us tonight. Thank you for joining us. We are deeply grateful for their dedication to fostering Indigenous education and their ongoing support of Sheridan students and, more broadly, our learning community. Please join me now in welcoming Elijah Williams from the Centre for Indigenous Learning and Support to introduce this evening's esteemed speaker, Roberta Jamieson. Elijah?
Thank you, Janet. I would like to introduce Roberta Jamieson. So Roberta Jamieson is a Mohawk woman who has accomplished a distinguished career of firsts. She was the first First Nations in Canada to earn a law degree, the first non-parliamentarian appointed an ex-officio member of a House of Commons committee, the first woman Ombudsman of Ontario, and the first woman elected chief of Six Nations of the Grand River Territory, where she continues to reside with her family today. Roberta has earned numerous awards, including most recently the YMCA's President's Award. She has 25 honorary degrees to her name. Roberta is also the president and CEO of Inspire and the executive producer of the Inspire Awards. Inspire is an Indigenous-led national charity that invests in education of Indigenous peoples to realize their highest potential. The vision of Inspire is to enrich Canada through Indigenous education by inspiring achievement. Inspire's K-12 Institute connects educators of Indigenous students with resources and community to improve educational outcomes and support sustained systemic change. Inspire Awards is a nationally broadcast gala honoring Indigenous achievement and provides outstanding role models for Indigenous youth. Roberta is here with us to talk about the challenges of decolonizing Indigenous education. Following her address will be a Q&A facilitated with myself and her. So please join me in extending a warm welcome to my friend and hero, Roberta Jamieson.
What a nice intro. Sego, Scano, Tanse, Bonjour, Bonsoir. Good evening, everyone. First, let me acknowledge the traditional territory, of course, my own people, the Haudenosaunee, and Huron-Wendat, Mississauga, the New Credit, and I want to acknowledge and say Nyawagoa, thank you to Eddie Robinson for bringing our minds together this evening and starting our discussion in a very good way. Nyawe. I also want to acknowledge and say Nyawe Miigwech to all of you for the warm welcome I've received since I arrived on campus. It was great to see Janet Morrison again, and wonderful to see Bertha Sky, your esteemed elder and someone I've known for many, many years. You are in good hands when you are on the receiving end of the wisdom of Bertha Sky. So this evening is an opportunity for all of us to get revitalized, redirected, recommitted to meet the challenges before us. I'm going to start by quoting Murray Sinclair. This name might be one that's known to you. He said, as the Chief Commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that, and he's now a senator, he said, in defining reconciliation, he talked about it being a core challenge for Canadian society. Reconciliation, he said, includes developing an aware understanding of the unjust and violent circumstances from which modern Canada has emerged, having an awareness of the damage done, with a goal of bringing about a new era, of sharing our energies to carry Canada into a new future. That's what I want to talk to you about tonight, because I think that's our task, yours and mine. And it's Sheridan's task as was so courageously embraced tonight by Janet's words. Our task is to create, to advocate, and to show leadership in making transformational change happen in our relationships and in our lives. Well, what do I mean by transformational change? When I look at what Sheridan's been doing, and I've been learning about it from Elijah Williams and others, I can see the beginning of transformational change. You are creating a welcoming and respectful place of learning. You're promoting dialogue among all of your students. You have a center for Indigenous learning and support, a place of friendship, and an opportunity. You've created an Indigenous Education Council to provide strategic advice and direction for the success and retention, importantly, of Indigenous learners. I'm bold to say, congratulations, and you must do much more, or transformational change will not occur. Because transformational change means a change that makes a difference in people's lives. Let me give you an example from Canada's past to illustrate the kind of transformational change I envisage. Our grandmothers would probably remember a Canada in which women were not able to be appointed to the Canadian Senate, to be senators. Why? Well, because of the simple fact that women did not qualify to be a person. I'm talking about the late 1920s, less than a century ago, in fact. Well, 5 courageous women then took that issue to the Privy Council in London, England, which in those days, those colonial days, was where the appeals went for Canada's Supreme Court. The question for the Privy Council was a simple one: is a woman a person? After the judges deliberated, Chancellor Lord Sankey wrote the decision, and he said, "Exclusion of women from all public offices is a relic of days more barbarous than ours." To those who would ask why the word person should include females, the obvious answer is, why should it not? That clear, simple, long overdue decision changed Canada, making it possible for women to be senators. At the same time, and more importantly, it changed behaviors, making it possible for women to get bank accounts, to own property, to drive vehicles, to be people. The change that occurred was not about reconciliation with women. It was transformational change. The one which took place has resulted in half of today's federal cabinet being women. And a woman who has served for almost 2 decades as the Chief Justice of Canada's Supreme Court has just retired after a very distinguished career. My point is this: Canada's decision to offer reconciliation to Indigenous peoples is just the starting point. And I'm asking you to join with me this evening in envisaging the transformation which must take place, and to envision a Canada which we can all be so proud to have, as that transformation creates a new reality. The transformation I'm asking you to join in making is simply to create a Canada where the Indian Act will not still be trying to civilize us. To create a Canada which will recognize and affirm our rights as original peoples, which frankly was finally given constitutional protection 3 decades ago, to create a Canada in which our situation today will be remembered as a relic of days more barbarous than ours. I am confident we can get there, but we have a lot of work to do. To start with, we must give our legislators the political will to take the necessary steps to create the transformation, to ensure that we no longer have a Canada where First Nations children go to schools which receive only 2/3 of the funding that we provide for other children. That we will no longer have a Canada in which the Inuit have a tuberculosis rate 220 times that of other Canadians. That we have transformed Canada so that it is no longer true that an Indigenous male has a greater chance of being incarcerated than graduating from university. No longer a Canada where decisions are made routinely in other places by other people about the programs and services and policies which affect our lives as Indigenous peoples without even a whiff of consultation or discussion with the people involved. We have to do what Inuit leader Tagak Curley said. In 1983, during the constitutional discussions, he said, we have to do some constructive damage to the status quo. So it's you and I, we the people, who must give governments the political backbone to do just that. What Indigenous people are seeking is clear recognition of the problems, and more than that, clear commitments, real action, frank acknowledgement that reconciliation can occur only after the damage of past decades, damage done by past governments, has been repaired. A promise that something will happen in decades to come does not give us much hope. We've heard that before. In the meantime, earnest folk are retweeting support for reconciliation where cultures, languages, and lives are dying. Monuments are being put up in city parks in the name of reconciliation. Media experts are writing media releases, which amount, in my view, too often to pure gesture politics. The appearance of support without providing support. If reconciliation is to take place in real ways, in real time, it must fulsomely deal with the real problems. So I believe we need to start hearing leaders being explicit, to say it clearly and out loud that Canada is ready to put an end to its addiction to colonial habits. Mohawks are very straightforward, as you can tell. We can no longer be satisfied with proclamations that announce shaking the habit, promising to quit and do better. We have to see change in real practice. Now, today, Canadians have an opportunity to become the former colonizers. And together, we can create our shared future by design. We can dream together, and we can make our dreams come true. That is what excites me today. The result would not be just reconciliation. It would be the results of reconciliation. That's my principal message this evening, reminding us, individually and collectively, that we have the power, the strength, the know-how to resolve problems, to design solutions and to implement them in our time. We have the power to make that change happen, not something we'll leave for our children to do. And although it might seem trite and obvious to say it, I will say, if we don't do it, it isn't going to happen. Sometimes, we start with good intentions to do the right thing, and then we get stalled because we think we don't know what to do. My experience is that when we are faced with a difficult question, it often helps us to jump ahead to think about what is the answer, the outcome that we're seeking. If Indigenous peoples, for example, could have a positive answer, if governments and opinion makers could at last make it explicit that they are committed to have a Canada which includes sustainable Indigenous communities. If you were to land here from Mars tomorrow and look around, you would decide the answer to that question is no. We need to hear yes. And we need to start setting about making it happen. So if we can get agreement on that powerful objective, we can start working together on making it happen. We need that reassurance, you see, because what has happened, the unacceptable situation we have today, did not just happen. The facts are that from the beginning, the Canada of 1867 had very firm views on who was going to form the population of the country and whose views, those views, didn't include me. Canada was to become exclusively for the settlers. The settlers own home and native land. That plan required that Canada would have to engage in the complete eradication of Indigenous peoples. Not physical genocide, but rather cultural, spiritual, political, and legal genocide intended to make whatever numbers survived to be indistinguishable from the rest of Canadian society. In other words, the new Canada then would be an Indigenous-free Canada, a Canada free of anyone else who was different from the British and French settler status quo, for that matter. The first Indian Act passed by the Dominion in 1876 was, after all, titled An Act for the Gradual Civilization of the Indians. I wonder if you knew that. By law, we were made wards of the state, regarded as incompetent to make our own decisions, and incidentally, unable to make legal challenges. The Indian Act gave authority to the government to take over management of all of our affairs and deny us our rights. A colonial model was developed where decisions about our lives were made in Ottawa, with a bureaucracy of agents to implement them across the land. Later, our ceremonies would be banned by law. The Prime Minister of the day called them debauchery of the worst kind. Our people were imprisoned for dancing, had to have a permit to be outside the reserve. We were prohibited by law from obtaining a lawyer to protect our rights and interest. It was illegal for more than 3 of our people to gather in assembly. Well, now some might say, those things no longer happen. True. In many cases, these sanctions are no longer needed. They have done their job. But the attitudes which fostered them originally still do exist. First Nations then were to be swept aside with the broom of progress, uncivilized chaff that didn't fit into the nation. Today, we are allowed to fit in with certain limitations. The same Indian Act as amended remains today, tonight, as the law of the land. And the unfortunate truth, which we really must take on board, is that education was to become the principal means of making all of that happen. Our children, as you know, you've learned, I hope, about the residential school situation, would be taken away to those schools and taught the Canadian way, taught to adhere to British values, religions, forbidden to speak our language, and taught our place in the new Canada. This was necessary, Prime Minister Macdonald told Parliament in 1879, because, and I quote, this is the Prime Minister speaking, "When the school is on the reserve, the child lives with its parents, who are savages, and though he may learn to read and write, his habits and training, mode of thought, are Indian. He is simply a savage who can read and write," end quote. This sentiment was renewed 9 decades later with the 60s scoop. The 1960s in our lifetimes, not some distant past. Tens of thousands of Indigenous children were removed from their parents so they could live in a good home with non-Indigenous parents, often in the United States, even in Europe, and money did change hands on occasion. These actions have set into motion an intergenerational legacy that has yet to run out. Adults who do not know what it means to be raised up in a family. People who never knew what parents are supposed to do, who never experienced being parented, who were never taught parenting skills. Students who became adults who fear showing emotion. People who lost their language, lost the ability to communicate with their grandparents. Imagine. People who lost their pride, their confidence in themselves. Children and youth taught to turn against their culture, taught to hate themselves and their people. Well, I think about these things when I see our children and youth today. I admire their resilience against all odds. I think of them also when I see the numbers, the incarceration rates, the children in care. Of course, the majority of children in care in Canada are Indigenous. And when I see the struggle of our children and youth and the lives they are asked to live today. Such tragic circumstances that we read about in the newspaper and see on television are unlikely to change until we have as our new reality something which our children and youth don't have, what most of all of us didn't have as Indigenous people. For me, in this, education is once again the key. It is the key to creating a future in Canada in which Indigenous peoples can make our own contribution as Indigenous people. And I see 3 kinds of education being necessary for this to happen. First, Canadians have to know their own history. They have to know the truths of what they found when they arrived, for example, on Turtle Island. Education about the democratic government happening here, which was then unknown in Europe. The scientific knowledge which existed in medicine, in botany, in astronomy, in law, in non-adversarial dispute resolution, in mediation, in sustainable agriculture. That too is Canadian history. Canadians have to know how Canada's original peoples made a conscious decision to share their lands and resources with these new arrivals, to share their future, in fact. Our offers of the Turo Wampum, in which the newcomers' rights to practice their own religion, to speak their own language, to follow their own customs, was guaranteed to them by us. Canadians also do not know of our offers of consent to enter into treaty relationships, our offers of peace and friendship. Remember, we were the majority. Our fierce and unremitting defense of the Crown, which made the difference of whether Sheridan College today is a Canadian college or an American one. The history Canadians teach their children still today does not include the fact that before Samuel Champlain and Jacques Cartier, Canada was composed of large numbers of human beings who were indigenous to their territories, people whose residency in those places goes back beyond the distant mists of time. Canadians generally do not know how we taught the newcomers skills about how to survive, Canada's demanding climate and geography, about the medicines to keep healthy, about routes of travel. Does Canadian history show how we shared food, taught the agricultural practices that would work here? How Indigenous peoples welcomed the diversity of the settlers, different languages, spiritual beliefs, cultures? So Canadians do not learn also that the Indigenous peoples were decimated by the waves of death brought to our communities by European diseases that we were not familiar with, sometimes deliberately spread. Canadians need to know what really happened to Indigenous peoples in Canadian history. Second, Canadians need to have access to education that situates their history as Canadians. Our history as Indigenous peoples is only half of the picture. All Canadians should know their own history in their relations with us, so they will understand what there is about it that created the need for reconciliation. Understand then what is needed now, today, if reconciliation is to happen. It's the universities of Canada who, with all respect for academic freedom, must provide the teachers, the administrators, the historians, all of them with the unexpurgated truths which Canadians have a right to know. Certainly our students have a right to know. The university itself must and take the steps necessary so that every student who graduates understands the history and legacy of the colonial enterprise. Indeed, in some universities and colleges, this is a required course. Every student who graduates should know the story of the last 150 years, of the racism, the deliberate acts to destroy our families and cultural ties, along with the unjust appropriation of land and resources. I have to stop and congratulate Sheridan College and offer every encouragement as you take on this unprecedented challenge. There are more subtle lessons to be learned. One of them is to ask ourselves, how is it possible that the situation we have faced could have continued over this last 150 years and still be with us in the 21st century. Like, how is that real? Why are we still trying to come to grips with it today, even in a lot of quarters just to acknowledge it? I think we believe a lot of our own press, frankly. So we're struggling to just try and acknowledge it, never mind doing something about it. You should also become conscious, should understand in your heart, the fact that collective passivity, particularly political passivity, has been a crucial element in maintaining the status quo. We're responsible. Gaining these understandings is especially significant, I think, for professional graduates. Nursing, medicine, law, social work, education, corrections. Universities and colleges will have failed in their development of these professionals unless professional practice includes taking personal responsibility to engage in a reconciliation process and to move forward into transformational change. None of what I talk about tonight or any other time in recounting the shared history we have in Canada, Canada, my people would call it, is about guilt. I'm not interested in guilt. For me, it's a very selfish, self-indulgent emotion. I'm interested in truth, acknowledgement, and moving forward. And taking personal responsibility for the future and making change happen. For me, engaging in the reconciliation that everyone is talking about in the country must include the fact upfront that universities and colleges have been very much an instrument of and a beneficiary of Canada's colonization of Indigenous peoples and our land and resources. There are still colonial practices in place which justify the education of our children by others, the denial of our jurisdiction over our own health, over the welfare of our own children, denial of jurisdiction over our communities. And there is still a huge apparatus, a veritable industry dedicated to administering our affairs. Understanding all that will help you understand the situation that exists today, the one that spills out in the media every day. You know, the murdered and missing Indigenous women, the suicides of children, prisons filled with our people, the crisis in our education, in our health, and so many of our children in foster care. This is our reality. These facts are real. We come by this honestly. This is our history together. The well-documented history of Canada, which you were never taught. As you examine and think about what you knew about the truth a few minutes ago, and you compare with what you know now, I'm sure you've been wondering, well, why wasn't I taught this in school? Why didn't I learn about this in university? Precisely. And changing that situation is a mission I believe Sheridan College is on, working closely with Indigenous peoples, working together to make it happen. The third area of education I want to share with you is the need to ensure that Indigenous peoples have the opportunity to provide our children with an Indigenous education. The education which we were not only denied, but it was suppressed as well. For me, the vision that I want to see as the Canadian reality, the vision I ask you to help come true, is for today's children to have what their parents did not have. what I didn't have. An opportunity for schooling, which includes our history, our languages, our values, our science and knowledge. A schooling which teaches us our cultural protocols, how to conduct ourselves as Indigenous people. A schooling which makes our young people validated in their identity and proud of ourselves, our culture, our people, which encourages us to hold on to those things. A schooling that helps our children reach their highest potential. I want us to have that kind of education so we can make a difference in our own lives and so that we can make a difference in the lives of other people. Frankly, I want us to have the kind of education I've described so that we can be in control of shaping our own future. You've heard that I am the CEO of Inspire. This is a national charity of which I am proud to be the president and CEO. And we work there every day to provide the kind of education for Indigenous children I'm talking about, by supporting educators, by supporting students and communities through the programs they're creating to preserve language, to imbue math and science and geography and history with Indigenous values through our K-12 Institute. From peer coaching to sharing successful practices, to mentorship, motivational gatherings of students and educators, we're working to change the educational outcomes of students at all levels so that in future, no longer will there be only 4 out of 10 of our people graduating from high school, while 9 out of 10 other Canadian children graduate from high school. We're trying to change that picture. Where Indigenous youth successfully complete high school, we offer much needed financial support. In just the last 12 years, we have raised and distributed more than $85 million through almost 28,000 bursaries to students. And 96% of the students we support graduate. That is an amazing number. So it's there to be had. Did I say we're a charity? I'm proud to call Elijah Williams one of our alumni. You know about his leadership skills. You snatched him up right away. I am here tonight to urge Sheridan College and to urge each of you who are hearing my words to take leadership and encourage others to join you in taking action. Action from your home base, I believe, will have an exponential effect on students and faculty and alumni as we all get excited. We, you and I, have to do it in our generation. We need your help because while I am more optimistic today than I have been my entire life about the future of Indigenous relations in Canada, I'm not sure yet that Canada understands the sustained effort that is required to make reconciliation a reality. I'm not sure we understand that if we don't realize that, that will cost our future. Did you know that if we close just the educational gap between our young people and other Canadians, we would add more than $400 billion to Canada's GDP? Pretty compelling case, that. And we'd save $115 billion in social assistance, jails, and what have you. I want to say to you that reconciliation, as you think about it, remember, it's not an event. It's not a noun. It's a verb. It requires constant action, daily maintenance, initiative, and perseverance. It involves building bridges, lots of bridges. In no way do I disparage those who are working towards collaborating to facilitate transition to university, or making the university environment more endurable, or helping Indigenous students pursue career paths. Yes, that can be the result of reconciliation, but that is not reconciliation. Reconciliation requires institutional, structural, societal change. And for Sheridan College, it must include an ongoing commitment, which I see here evident tonight, to decolonize your university. Your actions internally will have a strong effect on many around you because you touch many in the community. You're involved and lead many community dialogues. Would you personally want to help create the reality I'm talking about? Will you accept the challenge I've talked about tonight? Will you help to make the vision happen over the next 10 years to find a way of building a better relationship? The ability of Sheridan College to form positive relationships with Indigenous peoples, your ability to form corporate relationships, those willing to work together with you in working with Indigenous peoples, depends on your personal commitment to that relationship. We don't have to take things the way we find them. I know that the graduates that leave Sheridan College, the Indigenous graduates, are potential change agents. They will be well equipped to change attitudes, change communities, to change Canada. They will build capacity, and they will be part of the Indigenous solution, creating a Canada which has sustainable Indigenous communities, a Canada where together we will define the next chapter of our common future. This is truly a worthy challenge for Sheridan College to tap into all of this. For those of you who respond to this call for reconciliation, for action, and wonder, well, yeah, okay, well, what am I supposed to do to begin? I would say reach out to Indigenous people, Indigenous communities, work with Indigenous-led organizations who are creating change, and listen, and respect, and support. Don't decide what is good for us, however benevolent or well-motivated the sentiment may be. This is a time for us to walk together, and if anyone is leading, it should be the Indigenous people themselves. Yes, Indigenous peoples welcome reconciliation, but that includes for us empowerment, our right to participate actively in decisions that involve our future. And we want some safeguards against things going bad. Our reconciliation will create the opportunity for dialogue. But know this, Indigenous peoples will be talking about real reform, something transformative. We will not be dismissed with those who say, you're being kind of impatient. Not very realistic what you're talking about. This is too complicated. This will take time. Be patient. This will not go well with our people. The time has passed. What we seek are respectful, collaborative, constructive, cooperative, bilateral, reciprocal relationships that are relevant and productive to both of us. You see, our people think in terms of what I've recalled before, the historic two-row wampum. Two people traveling together, each with our own cultures flourishing, flowing down the river of life together, each helping the other, each offering mutual aid, but neither telling the other how it should conduct its affairs. And we think our people have something called the historic covenant chain of friendship, an agreement of peace and friendship we made, in which we come to each other's assistance, a chain which we meet together to polish and clean when it starts to get tarnished or rusty. Well, we need to do some polishing. But these are the kinds of relationships you are well equipped to engage in. I believe today that Canadians want to see real change. I believe they want reconciliation. I believe Canadians want to see a positive future for Indigenous people. They want to see a Canada that includes Indigenous communities. And I believe, and I ask you to believe, that that change is achievable. If you don't know where to start, begin with the roadmap of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Download it. Read the report, not just the executive summary. Make a list of the items that you might want to get involved in. Then work with others to make it happen. Talk about these issues. Open a conversation at your supper table, at your church, at your schools, at your clubs. Start building political will. Call your member of parliament. Call a senator. Call your provincial elected member and ask them what are they doing to make those commission's calls to action a reality. Call when you see a news story that needs an editorial. Let the media know when you think they're reinforcing prejudice and division, that they're misinformed, or that they should be called to account. On the other side, recognize and celebrate positive initiatives. Note where communities are succeeding. Celebrate the successes as we do at the Inspire Awards every year. There are outstanding examples of Indigenous achievers. Let's acknowledge them, hold them up, and aspire to be like them. Note where corporations and First Nations are building economic prosperity and where positive changes are coming. Sheridan College, I urge you to work with other post-secondary institutions, Indigenous ones, like Six Nations Polytechnic, which is an invaluable source of Indigenous knowledge. I believe we can become a Canada where old Canadians, new Canadians, and already here Canadians achieve a reconciliation so that all of us can become an asset to our people, our Canada, and the world. This time around, we can create our shared future by design. We can dream together, and we can make that dream come true. That is so exciting to think about. And as Senator Murray Sinclair said, we can bring about a new era of sharing our energies to carry Canada into a new future. So let's do it. Nyawagoa, thank you for listening to my words.
That's it.
Thank you, Roberta, for that insightful and I think very informative conversation on reconciliation, the need for action. So this is going to be our Q&A portion of the session. So that you can see there's microphones on each side of the room. So if you want to ask Roberta a question, feel free to line up. And I'll give her a chance to rest from that long conversation. But I guess for myself, and I guess I've been reflecting on this a lot lately, because my passions in life are law and art, and I read a lot of policy all the time, and so I was reading different documents like the Royal Commission report, different Auditor General reports, Truth and Reconciliation report, and what I've noticed from each of those reports, they had tremendous concrete recommendations, aspirations to a Canada that is actually built upon respect and generosity of our knowledges, but what I've noticed is that they just become reports, that they become sort of failed initiatives, failed MOUs, failed tactics. But I guess from your perspective, how can we ensure that Truth and Reconciliation doesn't become one of those shelved reports that we see too much in our country?
Well, I think we have to take personal responsibility. I've lived through many reports. Let's just take the field of education. From the 60s, the Hawthorne report, right till today, the themes are the same. They are saying what I've been talking about, which is it's, solutions that are developed elsewhere and exported to our communities have been a colossal flop. Do we need any more evidence of that? I don't think so. But I am encouraged that people are starting to get a hold of the business case, the economics as to why we need to pay attention to this. We're an aging population in Canada. We have incredible natural resources. The courts are dragging us kicking and screaming, some of us, to acknowledge that we're not going to develop as a country unless we do a couple of things. We better figure out how to work with First Nations and other Indigenous peoples who have control over a lot of the resource base, as acknowledged by the Supreme Court. They have a say. There's a requirement for them to have a say. And so we need to take that on board. The second thing, and I think that's new, it's incredible how rapidly, how many Supreme Court decisions there have been. As a lawyer, I watch those things, and I can tell you corporations are paying attention to that. They have to. So we need to take that on board. Secondly, we're an aging population. Fastest growing demographic group in this country are Indigenous people. Do we want Indigenous young people who are in jail, in care, on social assistance for more generations? I can't imagine anybody would wish that on their children, their grandchildren, our seventh generation as we're taught to focus. So let's have a reality check in Canada. Let's stop believing our own press that we are the envy of the world. In some cases, our promise is the envy of the world. But we have to, at long last, pay attention to these relations. And I think I'm seeing that change. I'm excited. I'm optimistic. I'm also a realist, though. And so I'm looking, where's the beef all the time, as they say. That's why I'm very action, concrete oriented. I like the statements. I want to see what's behind it. I want to see the change. I want my grandchildren to witness the change and benefit from the change. And I think we all do. So we have incredible power in this country. Let's just use it.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a microphone over there if you'd like to ask a question.
Thank you very much. It's amazing to listen to you. I have a comment and a question. Women in the Indigenous time in the 1680s were having a certain position in their communities. They were selecting the chief of the committee. And you mentioned today, in 1920s, how that kind of realization that women has to have, a woman is a human being and have such kind of right to vote, to drive, to be a counselor. So, and I'm glad you are a woman talking about the history and about how it changed that kind of situation we are at now. I am an educator, and I am a woman, and I love to get more kind of ideas from you, Roberta, if you can, how women can be more involved in doing the change.
Well, I think it begins with acknowledging our power. We are, after all, the majority of the population. Do we exercise that power? Do we vote? Do we, I mean, we are in many, well, we are in many areas, we're in charge of the economy of many households. And I think we need to have a sense of that, more of a sense of that, and encourage one another. I watch things like, who's on corporate boards, for example. Incredible power corporations. And I watch the change over time. I can tell you it's glacial in terms of the number of women on corporate boards. I think we went up 1% last year. Okay. Indigenous people, we went backwards last year. So I think some of these measures we really need to focus on and talk about as women, as people. And it's up to us. It's always, it's up to us. We need to feel our own power and exercise it in the best possible way. We bring unique talents. We are really excellent at resolving conflict. Lord knows we mediate most of the day. Because we've had to. And there are unique things. That's another speech. I'm always on about what women bring to the table that's different. Yes. I'm not interested in women who try to be men. I think women who are women and embrace that and share our special insights with men, the rest of society, is enriching.
Yes.
And we need to do more of that.
They are mother. They are the mothers who raise the children.
Yes.
Yeah, and the Indian Act has taken the status from them if they marry non-Indigenous person. Yeah.
Yes, it had historically, that's true.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
And that actually brings me up about the Indian Act, because I've read that a lot through different projects that I've done. And it's kind of extraordinary, really, if you really look at the Indian Act and how it has shaped since inception to now, 2017, is that it really wasn't being changed because there was political will throughout history. It was really being changed because the Supreme Court decided that it was actually ineffective, or that they had to strike down these laws because it was really inconsistent with the fundamental principles of justice at the time, throughout those times. So I don't know if you've ever, why do you think there was ever no political will to do it on any parties? And that's both liberal and conservatives throughout history.
Well, I think what I've said tonight is the answer. I can tell you that I'm watching with great interest right now, as maybe some of you are. There's a bill in second reading in the House of Commons right now. I'm trying to remember the number of it. It was introduced by Romeo Saganash, who's an NDP member, and it's been supported by the Liberals. Very interesting to watch this. The bill essentially says Canada signed on to something called the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Very high bar. And his bill says that all Canadian law should conform to the UN Declaration. That is simply incredible. I can say during my lifetime, I grew up with an Indian agent in the community. My parents owned a greasy spoon, and I used to have to serve him lunch on the council days. I'd run home from school. I was in grade 8. And I watched how he treated our people. And I decided then I was going to do something to change that. And it's incredible. So I've seen that. I was involved in the constitutional discussions in the 80s. I've seen that. I've seen the apology on residential schools. I've seen the UN Declaration be accepted by Canada. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I'm looking for the next couple of chapters, though, to happen. I was saying before we came in here, patience is not my strong suit. I think our people have been incredibly patient.
Hi, my name is Jason. I am of Maliseet descent from Tobic First Nations. And in your speech, you said that we as Indigenous people need to be part of the decision-making process. So how can we become part of this process?
I think, again, by supporting our leadership, but supporting our leadership by holding them accountable as well. Our own leaders now, I think if there's going to be change, we need to build capacity on both sides. You have a partnership when you have good capacity on both sides, and it takes some learning, some commitment, some political will on both sides. So I think one is by supporting our leadership in a good way, making sure our people believe you've got to have a good mind. So making sure that we keep a good mind and that our leaders are focused on solutions and they're focused on the 7th generation and they're building a vision for the future. So we need to do that with our leadership just as much as I'd like to see other Canadians do that with their leadership. I think that's a way. I think by getting the skills we need, graduate, get your skills, take them to the table, offer them up. When I decided to go to law, I was originally wanted to be a doctor, and then I decided after the James Bay crisis, some of you may remember, that we better have some legal skills in our toolkit if we're going to change things. So off I went to law school. So I think getting the tools around you that will help you make your best contribution. I've always been taught we have to be the best we can be. That's our job. The Creator gave you talents and resources and insight and energy, and it's our job to put it to good use. Surround yourself with people who will make you feel positive, give you energy, help you move forward. And all of those things are how we can start being more involved and expressing our own sense of power and insight and vision in creating a better country. That's what I think.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've also been reflecting on, I reflect a lot as an individual, and what I've also come to understand and learn on my own is how extraordinary it is throughout all this different assimilation attempts, tactics, the cultural genocide that has been happening and still actually in some cases continues with the overrepresentation of Indigenous youth in care. The fact that we're still here today says a lot about our resilience, about our determination to be in this country, to continue to build Canada, to shape it in a way that is both reflective of our needs, but also the needs of everyone. And I was thinking about that, and being in ceremony, because we just had our big midwinter ceremonies that happened, I was like, the fact that we can still continue this shows that we were still proud of who who we are as Indigenous people, as First Nations, as Haudenosaunee, that we have that pride in who we are as individuals. And I see that in some people, and then I also see in my work as the coordinator here that there's some students that don't have that pride, or that they still are not sure where they fit into this context of Canada. So I've noticed that. And is there a way for students to become more proud of who they are?
Know who you are. I think that's number one. That's been the source of my strength, is if you have a strong, and this is what many of our laureates, our Inspire Award recipients, our students tell us, the key to their success is strength of identity. And how do you get that? Know your history, know your culture. If you can have access to your language and learn it, wonderful. But know who you are. When you know who you are and you're valid, I mean, this is, a lot of people say, oh, our kids, they lack self-esteem and confidence. They don't lack self-esteem. They lack validation that they're valuable to the rest of society, that our identity as Indigenous people is valued. That's what's lacking. It's not the kids. It's the outside that is, are we validating our own children in our own homes as Indigenous people, and are we in Canada validating them? So yeah, I get up every day, you know, there's some days I, think, gee, how, it's like I get impatient and I want to see change yesterday and so on. And then I get, and then I think, this is simply remarkable that our people are still here. And we need to celebrate that and nurture that and strengthen it. And I think, when you go to ceremonies, however we do it, right? Some people go to ceremonies, other people do it in different ways. But yes, we are here and we will be here. I think that's pretty clear.
It is. And
There's one more question.
Oh, is there another question over there? Ask away.
Hello. Thank you so much for that insightful and astute talk, and thank you, Elijah, for your part in this. My name is Leanne Spiegler, and I'm a fourth-year kinesiology and health promotion student at the Davis campus here at Sheridan. I am attempting to follow Indigenous research practices here through my independent study. And in order to explore the perceptions of the sense of community that Indigenous students share here, in order to improve the values of diversity and strive to create an equitable and inclusive place to study and work. And my question for you is, what actions need to be taken in policy and on the ground within historically Eurocentric institutions, such as Sheridan College, that can bridge the gap between Sheridan community and truly being able to engage the Indigenous students?
Well, I think this is a good start. I think that it's very important for Indigenous people to see themselves at every level of university. I don't know how many faculty members are Indigenous. I don't know how many members of the board are Indigenous. I don't, we were talking about this earlier tonight. I always ask those questions. I don't know, I do know there are 300, we think about 300 Indigenous students out of 24,000. Got a ways to go. Are those students drawn here? Why are they drawn here? Do they stay or do they quit? Do they find the environment welcoming? I'd say talk amongst yourselves as students. Make sure your voices are heard. You know best what you need to support you in an environment. In some places across the country, Indigenous students use the Indigenous Student Center more than others. Some areas, access to elders is incredibly valuable. You're very fortunate. But I think insisting that the curricula include Indigenous ways of knowing, and if it doesn't, why doesn't it? It always surprises me. There was a great scientific discovery that if you plant corn, beans, and squash together, they create a magnificent nitrogen cycle. That was a scientific discovery. But our people have been planting corn, beans, and squash together. We call them the three sisters since time immemorial. I think we knew that. And so some of those teachings, those ways of knowing, should be in your curriculum. If it isn't, I would ask about it.
Thank you very much.
Those are just some starts, just a start.
Yes.
Visiting professors. Why can't you have people come in, even if they don't? Every hire, I would look to see who's being hired. I would ask, what kind of outreach did you do to Indigenous communities to get applicants? If you say, you know, job open, that doesn't necessarily mean our people are going to, we're different. We need different approaches to get us involved.
Exactly.
Those are just some things. There's a great resource on the Universities Canada, actually, website on, and we work with Universities Canada, on different ways that are being tried across the country that are indigenizing campuses. So have a look at that.
Excellent. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good question.
Is there any other questions for Roberta? You still have an opportunity to come up to the mic to ask. Yes, over here.
I can just hold it. Oh, no. Oh, okay. All right. Hello, thank you. I'm very grateful to have been here to listen and receive the wisdom you're sharing so graciously. I want to greet you as well, just as a teacher, an elder, and a relative in humanity. And I extend that greeting to everyone here as well. So my name is Muhammad Kumail. Many friends know me as Moku. And I was born here, but my family migrated from Pakistan and India and another part of the world that has been impacted by colonization. And it's been an international phenomenon. Yet when I speak to some of the people within my communities, it seems that colonial conditioning almost has been so ingrained that when they come here, they're carrying those same stigmas and bias and prejudice towards the Indigenous people here, right? And it to me doesn't make sense, because almost we should know firsthand of the residual impacts that colonization can carry, right? So as I'm working to assume my own personal responsibility and finding my place in all of this, the theme of decolonization has been brought up, and I've seen it rise many times. So I was wondering if you could unpack it a little bit more tonight. I know that's somewhat of a loaded question, but it's something I think about and reflect on. So I'd appreciate any insight or guidance.
Well, I would ask you, how do you think that we can talk to newer Canadians about the situation with Indigenous people, and in a way that includes them in shaping a future? I hear from many new Canadians a willingness to learn, a desire to learn. I hear from others, well, we came here with nothing, what's the matter with your people? So it's a range of views. And I think I'm glad to see some of the changes in the materials that are being shared for citizenship courses. We're finally teaching people who are coming to Canada about treaties. We're teaching, and I think this is a good start. I think this is a good start, because so many people come to the country, have no idea about the history. And I think we're in a position, as we depend so much on immigration in this country, as we always have, that we should be ensuring that all newcomers understand the history of the country. And the history of the country includes the chapters dealing with the relations with Indigenous people. So I think that's a good place to start. Those who are here, I think finding ways to engage and embrace them, talk about your own past, and there are alignments, and challenge why is it that back home you noticed that and over here you didn't. I mean, go right back to the early settlers. I mean, people came to Turtle Island to escape oppression somewhere else. You know, did we forget that part? So I think those things, those reality check, I'm a big fan of reality checks.
Thank you. I'm inspired.
Sorry, I can't unpack it anymore tonight.
No, that's fine.
That's about 3 other speeches.
Yeah, that gives me much food for thought, and I'm inspired by the vision that you're painting tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I think to that point too, because Cindy Blackstock talks about this a lot, we're creating refugees in our own country that we're not actually willing to support within First Nations communities, and sometimes within an urban context, that we have that dialogue of this viewpoint that Indigenous people are all the stereotypes that we know, but we never focus really on the success stories that happen, the innovations that were happening. Because Sheridan has commitments to creativity. And when I think of creativity and when I think of Indigenous ways of knowing and knowledge, there's one word that I think connects both of them, and that's innovation. And to me, innovation is that those ideas that really can shape a future that can benefit everyone. But we never really talk about those issues in school. And what I've noticed throughout history classes that I've taken, it's always, as in the Indigenous history course, but we're not really going to talk about it in the Canadian history course. It might be in that other one over there that not everyone is really understanding the true impacts of what Indigenous knowledge and values has to offer to everyone here.
Well, a word about innovation, everybody, it's such a buzzword now, and we tend to associate it with robotics and, social media and new inventions, and I challenge us to really look at innovative ideas that have been around for a very long time. And I've mentioned one of them about the 3 sisters. There are many, many, many more. Doesn't have to be new. It can be newly rediscovered. A lot of talk about social innovation on a lot of our campuses now. Really encourage you to check that out. It's very exciting. And it's the kind of, we're trying to discover ways of living together in diversity. Well, hey, we did that originally. There are things there to learn. Perhaps not perfectly, but I think there are things there to be learned as well.
And
so thank you.
Question over here.
Oh, yes. Hi there.
Hi. A branch of my mother's family is from Six Nations. And my great aunt actually started the Native Cultural Center in downtown Toronto. And as family,
who's your aunt?
Helen Mount Pleasant.
Oh yes, of course. Okay.
So as the family
Pleasant
genealogist, I'm collecting stories, not just data from their lives. And what I know and what I've discovered is that despite everything that seems to have gone on in their lives, like they've always been very well educated. And within our family, that's the expectation for them has never been less or never been different. And so I guess I ask you, in spite of all the history, how do you account for those successes, even as an entire family where they just seem to be out there making a difference in their own community and in the greater community at large? My cousin Melissa's teaching at Hagersville Secondary School, and I'm just so proud of what she's accomplishing there. But again, how is it? What do you account for your success and those types of successes despite all of the hardship, I guess?
Well, that's a huge question. For me, it's been one part strong sense of who I was, one part family, tremendous family support, luck, and having wonderful people around me, mentors, role models that I could look up to, and values that I relied on, and a sense of responsibility, strong sense of what I'm writing about as Indigenous reciprocity. And I think those are all things that, but you know, many of our people have become educated, and I'm a big fan of capacity building through education, but there are many other leaders in our community as well who have not done that through attaining a degree. We need to honor them as well. They are successes. You know, the women, the older women who have single-handedly sustained our languages in many ways. You know, starting the schools, the immersion schools at Six Nations. A couple of teachers who taught for nothing, developed curriculum from scratch. These are the people we need to honor. And as we do that, we're building the strength as others see them. Just as you've admired your aunt, as we, and this is what we do at the Inspire Awards, watch for it on CBC and APTN. We hold up every year, you know, 13 outstanding First Nations, Métis, and Inuit achievers. This year, one of our youth honorees is, guess what? The first Inuk woman, first Inuk, never mind woman, first Inuk to be a cardiac surgery resident in the country. She's from a small community, Cambridge Bay, way up in the Arctic, and look what she's doing. And so by telling her story, we're encouraging other people to say, gee, that's achievable. I can do it too. So that's what I would say in response to your question today. It's a big question. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of it. So Roberta, I would like to present you with Sheridan's Curiosities book as a gift for your insightful and very meaningful words to everyone. And so I want to say thank you on behalf of our Sheridan community and I see a lot of outside community members here as well. So thank you.
I'd
like to welcome Janet back to the stage.
No, I can. I'll get off the stage.
Okay. I'm driving people away. So I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you so much, Roberta, and thank you, Elijah and Eddie and Stephen and Bertha, to all of our colleagues and leaders in the Centre for Indigenous Learning and Support. This has been a thought-provoking, moving, empowering conversation and discussion for our community tonight. We are tremendously conscious of what our accountability is, and there is so much more to be done. What I would want folks to know is that we have a number of ongoing faculty searches underway. We are looking to do Indigenous hires. We're actively seeking Indigenous educators, and there are Indigenous leaders on those hiring committees. And we know that that's our obligation. We're committed to it. We're excited about it. I wanted to note that leaders from our Centre for Teaching and Learning are here tonight. We know that faculty development matters, and we're seeking counsel and input to ensure that that happens without delay and in a way that is led by members of our Centre for Indigenous Learning and Support and our Indigenous Education Council. We have Elijah and Eddie engaging actively with faculty members around informing curriculum and incorporating Indigenous knowledge, ways of knowing into what we're already doing, and redesigning, rethinking what we're teaching and how we're teaching it. So we're hearing the messages and we're taking good counsel, Roberta, in part from Elijah, who I know has learned from your leadership. And finally, I wanted to invite members of the community to check out some of the videos online about the skateboarding project, because if you haven't seen that, it's so uniquely Sheridan. Our engagement of youth from Six Nations in a skateboard building project. If you're looking for a fill the bucket moment, check out what our colleagues in the Faculty of Art, Animation and Design spend some of their summer doing. Again, I want to thank Sheridan Centre for Indigenous Learning and Support and the Sheridan Student Union for their collaborative work hosting tonight's event. I also want to extend our gratitude again to TD Bank Group for their generous sponsorship of the Creative Campus series. Finally, a heartfelt thank you to you, Roberta Jamieson, for sharing your wisdom, provoking discussion, and inspiration tonight. It's a tremendous honor to host you here at Sheridan. Finally, if you haven't had a chance to do so already, the Creative Campus galleries upstairs will be open until 9 o'clock. I hope you'll visit their current exhibition, Jeff Thomas's Indians on Tour, which is presented in partnership with the Centre for Indigenous Learning and Support. Thank you all again. Good night.